Steam from the mug grasped in my hands rose sleepily into the crisp air, making its way past my line of vision before disappearing into the gray morning sky looming above. It was just after sunrise, but the rest of the world hadn't seemed to have gotten the memo. The forest before me was deafeningly silent. The only sound that made its way into my ears was that of my breathing and its rhythmic calm. I remember moving to this little house at the end of the long gravel road, snuggled in a nest of large evergreen and maple trees that seemed to hide the place I now knew as home. I also remember walking along the gravel road for the first time, completely in awe of the colors and textures that surrounded me. The deep orange and brilliant red of the trees beginning to lose life as winter crept near was indescribably breathtaking, the lush green grass scattered in patches along the way striking in comparison. I didn't even have to see the house to know it would be the place for me. Even after I completed a tour of the whole place, which wasn't saying much considering it was a one-bedroom, one-bathroom house on only one floor, I didn't hesitate to sign the lease. I knew this home was mine. I shivered, the contents of my hot mug of tea now sitting deep within my belly, unable to be used anymore to warm my hands. Leaning back in my chair, I let out a deep sigh. The rabbit hadn't stopped by yet, though it didn't really surprise me considering the chill in the air. It probably wouldn't come around until the sun was higher in the sky and working hard to send down as many precious rays of warmth as it could before night settled in once again. Shorter days, however, were of no concern to me, since I found myself to have more intriguing thoughts once the sun went down. Although it also meant I wouldn't be seeing as much of the rabbit as I would like. I shrugged to myself as I stood and stretched, enjoying the freeing sensation caused by the popping and cracking of my joints, while my muscles let out all the stiffness they'd built up the night before as I'd slept. After scanning the small yard once more to see if the rabbit was there but coming up dry, I smiled at the beautiful trees reaching their arms far above me before turning and ambling back into the house. I closed the sliding door behind me, leaving it unlocked. I never had any visitors, and there wasn't anyone else living nearby that I knew of besides the rabbit, so I never found much reason to lock any of the doors. I also owned nothing that anyone would want to break and enter for, which added to my sense of ease, though maybe I was just being careless. I rinsed out my mug and put it into the drying rack. The only thing my home lacked that I wished for once in a while was a dishwasher. But to be fair, there was only me, so it wasn't as if I was producing a large amount of food or dishes, and it would probably just waste water. When I happened to glance out the kitchen window, I could see the rabbit staring at me from between the pickets of the fence surrounding the yard. I chuckled to myself before making eye contact with it. Look who decided to turn up. You are sitting outside. You know I don't like to come into the yard when you're out here. Yes, well, I do that every morning. I'm mildly surprised you aren't used to it by now, considering how long I've lived here. If I'm uncomfortable with it, then that's that. I'm content with just watching you from afar. No need to put myself in the position to feel in danger if I can help it. Anyway, how are you today? I smiled. Good. The colors of the trees are inspiring me more today than they have before, so I wonder if they've gotten brighter. I don't know about brighter, but they're definitely dropping a lot faster now than they were before, so maybe winter is going to come early this year. And I'm fine, thanks for asking. Your humor's a little drier today than normal. What's wrong? And why are you sitting outside the fence instead of coming in like you usually do? I'm inside now, so there's nothing for you to worry about. The rabbit's ears twitched, one flicking to the right as if listening to something in the distance. No reason. It hopped to the left a few steps before turning back to look at me again. I'll be back later. With that, the rabbit dissolved into the foliage, leaving me to wonder what could have been the problem. On usual days, it would keep me company, just sitting outside the kitchen window for the majority of the morning before eventually disappearing by noon. Why this day was any different, I hadn't the faintest idea, but my mind was already moving on to other things. I decided the night before while attempting to go to sleep that I would do one of two things today. Either go to the house or go into town, since I was running low on groceries. I always hated going into town, though, since it meant I had to interact with people. Not that I hated people, it's just that it took more than a little effort on my part to be presentable and pleasant to someone other than myself or the rabbit, and, because of that, I generally avoided being anywhere with humans if I could. Part of the reason I moved to this house in the first place was because of the distance from actual civilization, and I liked to keep it that way. Without even trying, I'd already made up my mind. To the house it was. Might as well put off human interaction for a little longer. Since it was still quite early, a shower seemed like the best next step in my morning. Growing up, it used to be that I was an avid night showerer, but once I was living on my own, I'd come to the conclusion that I didn't like the way it made my hair look the next day if I were to shower at night, an issue that I didn't think twice about as a child who couldn't care less about its appearance. It did seem a bit amusing to me, though, that now I cared about my appearance, considering that 99% of the time, the only ones to ever see me were the rabbit and myself, neither of whom I had anything to prove to. Then again, maybe growing up made me realize that I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anyway, and that the way I kept myself was for me and not for anyone else. The hot water streamed through my hair and pelted my shoulders, warming up my previously shivering body. Not only were morning showers great for warming me, but they also gave me a little more time to wake up fully before facing the day. I make it seem like I live such a hard life if I say before facing the day, which is not really true. Most of the time, I live life almost like a daydream walking around in reality. My world is both much smaller and much bigger than that of people who don't live in my reality. Smaller in the sense that I'm nearly always alone, but bigger because I know myself inside out, upside down, through and through. I guess to some people that it might make life seem boring, knowing oneself so well. But to me, it's vital that there are no mysteries to me about who I am. There were enough of those with the people I grew up around. I hate not knowing what other people will think, do, and how they'll act, so I figured that starting out by at least knowing every single detail about myself would be a good place to start. I scrubbed my hair, then smoothed conditioner through the tangles that had formed as I'd slept. I still felt a little tired. The shorter the days became, the harder it was for me to fall asleep at night. It always seemed like there were better things to do than to sleep, such as reading, writing, painting, thinking, eating, drinking tea, drinking coffee, which I don't really recommend because that usually prohibits me from any hope of ever falling asleep, and sometimes even going on nighttime walks in the woods. I guess to many, it may seem detrimental to my health to have such a strange sleep schedule, but because I didn't work a job away from home or go to school or anything resembling those things, I had the freedom to live life at my own pace. Even as an artist, I wasn't under any time constraints to get my art to my cellar by any particular date, and it was up to me and me alone. Stepping out of the shower and into the steamy bathroom, I toweled off my body and blow-dried my hair before heading back to my bedroom to find some clothes to dress myself in. I opted for a pair of sweatpants and a long white-sleeved t-shirt. Good for the cold and comfortable. I pulled on some thick socks since the hardwood floor beneath my bare feet was uncomfortably chilly, then put on a black beanie to finish it off. It wasn't the most glamorous look in the world, but it was efficient at keeping out the autumn breeze, so I was happy. Because I didn't own a cell phone, computer, or anything that could really connect me to the outside world, I was asked by my seller to purchase a phone on a landline so that she could get a hold of me without actually having to come over. I agreed, but wasn't really too thrilled about the idea of getting calls from people other than her. I had a fear of speaking on the phone with people I wasn't familiar with, so the last thing I wanted was some unwanted scammer trying to sell me things over the phone. So naturally, I never answered the phone when it rang, which even hearing it in the first place made me extremely uncomfortable, and opted to always wait and let it go to voicemail before checking whom the caller was. Thankfully, the phone hadn't yet shrieked at me that day, so I assumed I wouldn't hear anything new when I checked my voicemail before heading out. After checking and breathing a sigh of relief when there wasn't, I went to the front door and sat down on the mat, yanking on my heavy-duty combat boots and lacing them up before standing and brushing myself off. I quickly scanned the room to make sure there wasn't anything I was forgetting, when I noticed my little notebook and pen sitting on the coffee table by the fireplace. I sighed, looking down at my boots in regret. I retrieved my notebook and stuck it along with the pen in my coat pocket once I'd put it on, before crawling on my hands and knees back to the door with my feet in the air to avoid getting the floor dirty with my not-so-clean boots. I could have just taken them off, but that would require lacing them up again, an endeavor I wasn't too excited to repeat. I finally made it out the door, closing it softly behind myself, then turning to breathe in the cold air for the second time that morning. I took the time to breathe deeply, inhaling the sense of the world of red, green, yellow, and brown around me. The sounds from earlier that had been missing now filled the air. The rustling of the leaves in the wind, the happy chirps of the birds who'd finally risen from their sleep, and the sound of gravel crunching beneath my feet as I began walking down the long, narrow road away from my home. There was something innately beautiful about the sound of the world waking up, and I always felt very privileged that I got to be a part of it.